For those who don't know me, I am assistant professor at the Department of Security and Emergency Services, and I also lead our Masters on Human Security and Resilience, and especially excited to have speakers today talking about resilience across borders, not only within the United States. So I'll begin with introductions, unless Dean Siedschlag, you want to say anything before I start.
Thank you, Iuliia, and everybody. I just wanted to say thank you for presenting and attending the presentation on this very important and unfortunately very, very timely and ongoing topic of municipalities' resilience during wartime in the case of Ukraine. I just want to say that our hearts are with all of those who suffer in this war. And I appreciate your willingness under this, under these wartime circumstances to present on this topic. Is very important, I believe, to raise awareness on the challenges, and then also look at, like Iuliia said, other parts of the world and other countries who are going through very difficult times, and learn about what resilience means to them and how they work as a whole community of the country to sustain and further build and demonstrate resilience. With that, without further ado, once again, thank you, and back over to you, Iuliia.
Thank you, Dean Siedschlag, and I'll begin with introductions, and then we'll give the floor to our speakers. But for those who joined us, please feel free to add questions in the chat, as I hope we'll have time for Q&A later on. And I'll start with introducing Oleksandra Keudel, Dr. Oleksandra Keudel, who is an associate professor at the Department of Public Policy and Governance at Kyiv School of Economics. Her research focuses on societal resilience and local governance in Ukraine. She holds a Ph.D. in political science from Freie Universität Berlin, and she had been a visiting researcher to the George Washington University, NYU and Södertörn University. Oleksandra does policy research on consulting on open government and public integrity for international organizations. I'll also welcome Maryna Rabinovych, who is assistant professor also at Kyiv School of Economics and postdoctoral researcher at the University of Agder, Norway. Her research interests include European Union external relations, Ukraine's European integration, as well as local governance and decentralization in Ukraine. In the last year, Dr. Rabinovych served as a senior researcher with the project on analyzing the effects of administrative-territorial reform and decentralization in Ukraine, which directly relates to the topic we will be discussing today. And last but not least, Andrei Darkovich, who is a student of the master's program on public policy and governance, also at the Kyiv School of Economics. And prior to the work at the center, he was engaged in research on issues of decentralization, community development, and open data. I would like to welcome our speakers, and I hope that these introductions could be also helpful for our faculty who does research on these questions, and maybe foster collaboration with our esteemed speakers. So back over to you, Dr. Rabinovych, Dr. Keudel, and Mr. Darkovich.
Thank you very much, Iuliia, for the kind introduction, and thank you very much, Mr. Siedschlag, for welcoming us today, and also for your support to those who suffer currently under Russia's unlawful war against Ukraine. And today, I think we are going to present in a bit of a different order, if this is fine for everyone, because this is a bit more logical in terms of how we have been developing the project on Ukraine's resilience and decentralization that Iuliia already mentioned. And we will start with Andrei, and then he'll be followed by Oleksandra, and then I'll speak a bit about the challenges that we may encounter, so maybe giving also a bit more food for thought and criticism and questions. So, Andrei, the floor is yours, and
I will speak about our recent research that we mentioned, that also Maryna mentioned, and we done with our team in Kyiv School of Economics. And its name explaining Ukraine's resilience to Russian invasion, the role of local governance. So starting from background, you can see that the kind of main topics of why we started this research, but the main question was a lot of people mentioned about Ukrainian resilience. A lot of people mentioned about Ukraine become resilient country, resilient system, but as you see on the slide, a lot of people say that about inspiration of this for free world, but in Ukraine and also in a lot of Western media, we can see the definition, what we understand about being resilient, what we understand of being resilient as system, as country, or as local governments. And we ask this question for us. And in the next slide, Maryna, please. We create some of approach for this article, and we try to explain the role of local self-government in this interstate war context and local and important factor of their resilience. And also we want to build some conceptual framework development, what we understand as resilience of local governments, what predictors we see of this resilience in Ukraine, and some context-specific knowledge. And then I speak a lot more about our approach, but we use a mixed method approach, qualitative interviews, focus groups with experts, surveys, and some regression analysis. Maybe next slide. And for our some theoretical framework, because I think that not everyone know about this decentralization reform and some reforms in Ukraine that we speak from this in our research, and some decentralization reform started in 2014, and it was changed if administrative-territorial units in Ukraine, and this we based on research to understand what maybe changes that was after this decentralization reform made some hromadas. Hromadas, it's administrative-territorial units, make them resilient. And we want to see how this process maybe influence this resilience, and maybe how we can use these factors to build more resilient hromadas in future. And maybe next about resilience, we define some kind of different shocks, because we understand that in the literature that resilience to different shocks is different resilience. And also we have our 7 types of shocks. We created this from the interviews with these municipalities who was in different kind of situation. Maybe some of them was occupied, others have problems with fuel, others have problems with shellings. So we have a lot of different focus group interviews, and we created this type of shocks. And from these types of shocks, we find some information about what was the key important factors for these hromadas that they can live in their situation, and was the main factors that they, as local governments, see as key factors of this being robust and be prepared for these shocks. And also, before I came to next slide, I want to mention that this is limited number of works that explore resilience and the interstate war. So we use a lot of literature about this hazard resilience to some nature hazards, and our main task was also to try to create some literature about resilience of the local self-governments in interstate war. So coming to the methodology, Maryna, maybe next slide, please. We see that we have these semi-structured exploratory interviews for conceptualization, what we understand as hromada resilience. And then we have some focus groups with experts for the purpose of the operationalization. to understand how we measure this resilience in our specific Ukrainian context of interstate war. And then we have two huge surveys with Hromadas, and I also then mentioned the sample and the number of the Hromadas as respondents, but we have these two surveys, and then we have interviews with experts to create some maybe indexes or to group this type of questions that was important for the local self-government to some methodology how to measure different kind of resilience. And we come into the conceptualization. The next slide, we created our in our conceptualization, we define resilience as three main factors based on the mainly like Norris literature and also of the literature about specifically Ukrainian-based literature. And we create this three dimension: the preparedness, the robustness, and the adaptation. So I stopped for a little bit to explain what we understand as preparedness and robustness and adaptation and how we measure it. So preparedness we understand as having like this number of some resources and like state of readiness to respond a disaster. How we measure in our specific Ukrainian context, but you should understand that it was really hard to have some open data from Hromadas in context of the ongoing war. So we measure our preparedness as 14 different metrics that we have from our surveys in Hromadas, and we ask them about 14 different resources that they have or they don't have before the invasion. It starts from the emergency plan or going to different resources as water supply, some stocks of the fuel, and then etc. And then we like create this preparedness index from these questions using like different interviews with experts, because we understand that having a response plan is more important than having a fuel. Maybe in this situation, because if you don't have like response plan, you can work with all other. So, and for measuring preparedness, we have this preparedness index. For measuring robustness as a part of resilience, we have so we understand robustness as ability of Hromada, as you understand this municipality in Ukrainian, as institutional system to keep its function under shock. How we mentioned this function under shock, we have two also questions in Hromada's our survey. Is they continuing to doing administrative work and garbage collection during the first months of invasion? So is it Hromada and municipalities, they continue being robust and giving this performing their main functions? And then we measured the last one, adaptation, and we understand adaptation is creating some new practices of the to stay resilient. And in our context, we have like 5 questions, 5 metrics, how Hromadas then, like after the year of the first year of war, how they work during the long electricity cuts following the Russian shelling, and like some problems with blackouts. And we ask them if they create 5 like the most important adaptations, some new practices to being able to like being resilient under these blackouts and like shellings. And next slide, please, Maryna. So you can see on our map, this map of Ukraine, and you can see by different color, it's like different. We have 2 surveys. One of the both of them made by KC. One made by our Center of Sociological Research, Decentralization and Regional Development. Another also by Agro Center. You can see that one is October-November of 22. Maryna, maybe previous slide, please. Sorry. One of them is October-November 22, and it was thus last our second wave, and it was 138 Hromadas And survey 2 was made in June-August of 22, and it was a sample of more than 400 hromadas. So it you can find more information in our article that I sent you in the comments, but for understanding, our sample was based on the urban-rural development divided of hromads and also by regions. You see that we covered the Ukrainian map in all regions and maybe in all types of hromadas. And the next, going to some first findings, we see that on the preparedness index, so on the question how hromada they were prepared to be resilient, we see that average score for this 138 hromadas that answered our questionnaire was 2.5. And so we should understand that 2.5 from the 14 questions is very low. So we understand that this preparedness of or this number of resources that they have before the invasion. So we ask them about these resources that they have like a month or like few days before Russian invasion in Ukraine, and they have this very low percent. But going to the robustness, next slide. So how they Ukrainian hromadas continue their work, continue their municipalities in the different localities, continue their function. We see that from the average number is 1.36 from the 2. So like it's a very good results. So the major of hromadas, they continued not only performing administrative work, but also in garbage collection. And as you see in the northern regions, where like Russian army was very close, and there was some war like in the nearest hromadas, other hromadas, they continue their administrative work to help the people. So they don't stop this, and this is a kind of robustness to it. And speaking about adaptation, the next map, you see that adaptational score was also like 3.1 from 5. That the most of hromadas, they make some changes, some new practices that help them to adapt to this Russian invasion and these problems with electricity and some shellings. And some numbers before I go to like findings of the for all this paper, what predictors influence this resilience and these results that you see on the maps. It's to understand that only 3 hromadas from the 138, like 2% of total score of 10, they have only 3 hromadas have 2 of 14 possible according to the developed crisis of preparedness index. So we have very bad numbers in preparation, but 66% of hromadas, they continue to make their main administrative functions due war. So not only that hromadas had the bad resources and bad preparedness, they stay resilient in their sphere of these main functions of administrative work. And to say about, next slide please, Maryna, to say about how we going to operationalize and understand what factors of this, maybe decentralization reforms, or maybe some factors of the demographic predictors, geographic predictors, or some wartime experience make this result that some hromadas become like resilient, maybe some hromadas have the better resources, or some hromadas had better adaptability. Understand, we create some predictors from Ukrainian open data. It's the next slide, you can find it on the next slide, Maryna, please. Or previous, yes, operationalization. And you can find that we created like 4 groups of predictors based on the open data from like different Ukrainian ministers or some statistics that we have in our center of KC. So we like have our regression models where we see if some of these predictors that you see, groups like some economic development or some social capital, we use like for economic development, we use the percent of own budget in these localities, like maybe or huge own like percent of urban population, or maybe availability of some business support centers, some number of hromadas in active network, maybe this is about some network cooperation, and maybe some of trust, as we measure it as voter turnout, yes, in these localities. And we try to see what of these predictors we have about. In our article, you can see that more than 20 or 30 predictors. What of them really statistically influences that one sense that hromadas had better result in like preparation, or better result in adaptation, or better result in robustness. And what we see as our final results in the next slide, that we see that the three main like findings that I want to share you about Ukrainian resilience of hromadas is that it is some rural-urban divide or difference in preparedness and robustness. We see that urban type of hromadas and hromadas with like oblast significance. Oblast significance is from the previous administrative divide, the cities with more money and this like the centers of this oblast before. These urban hromadas, they have more resources and they were better in preparedness. So they have like more resources starting from this response plan to some of resources to be resilient, like stocks of fuel, food, water. But on contrary, we see that negative relationship between full suspension of administration services and urban types of hromada. So these urban hromadas, in them, that was more some suspensions of administrative provision. And also that we find that of revenue also mentioned, or also important indicators that greater capacity of own income in hromada that influenced their like preparedness, and also that some social factors and predictors as water turnout, as well as physical hubs also influenced the more adaptation in these hromadas. And the last, like our finding was that the number of agreements, which we can find also on the last our slide, but the number of agreements signed by hromada, so this cooperation network between these localities, they also influenced this resilience and like robustness and adaptation. So hromadas who was have a better connection with their neighbors, or hromadas in this like oblast, or like different connections, they have better resilience statistically in our regression. And we understand this as also as part of this huge like concept of network building that really influences not only capacities by hromada, but also the resilience. I think that that's all these main findings, but I ask you also to find more in our article that I also sent you after my presentation to the chat, and maybe some questions you will have after Maryna or Oleksandra presentation or now. So thank you, free to ask in chat, and then maybe we answer this.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andriy. And I think now we are supposed to have Oleksandra's intervention, and she will also speak about hromadas, but probably with more insight into the practices that also help them be resilient and sustain the challenges of the invasion.
Very much. Good morning, everyone, and thanks a lot for invitation and for your interest in this topic of Ukrainian hromadas. So I will also share several slides. So I would like to indeed speak on the mechanisms which we found with a study which we did together with Oksana Hus from Bologna University. On the mechanisms of what makes Ukrainian municipalities and actually the local level of governance resilient in the crises that have occurred because of the Russian invasion. So, but before I go, I have to give you a little bit of a background of how we look theoretically at the local level of governance in Ukraine. So Andrei already mentioned Ukraine went through the so-called decentralization reforms, which were actually 3 interconnected reforms. So one was administrative, when about 12,000 smaller municipalities were amalgamated into 1,469 plus the city of Kyiv, and that increased pressures for more efficient governance. Then there was a fiscal reform, which basically made the municipalities independent, that gave hard budget constraints to the municipalities, so that they received 60% of their personal income tax directly into their budget, which was a big difference to what they used to be, where they had to rely on the higher levels of government for allocating the money to them. So now they could be more independent in their planning, and that also actually created pressures to be more effective with using that money that they had. Why? Because there was also the political part of the reform, which was about increasing, really implementing this subsidiarity principle, where they became responsible for important spheres such as education, healthcare, and social services. So with these 3 reforms, the Ukrainian citizens in their municipalities, they suddenly realize that they have an authority, an agent in their municipalities whom they can ask for accountability. And in fact, they did. Just to put it very short, the reform took place starting 2014, when also the Revolution of Dignity, or the Euromaidan, they won the the political struggles, and there was a very big move towards self-government, more citizen participation on all levels. Plus, Ukraine has been going through the digital transformation, with a lot of services being available as e-services, and also with easier communication tools established. And so, to put it very long story very short, the outcome of this was that there has been a shift towards citizens as partners in co-production, rather than just apolitical service consumers. And local authorities have become sort of centers of this increased public demands for more agency. So with this background, we argue that at the local level of Ukraine, of the governance, Ukraine created something that qualifies as a polycentric system of governance, where you have semi-autonomous units on the local level that are interconnected between each other. And of course, they're connected within the constitutional system, and they are bound by laws, but still they are rather autonomous in how they can deal with the local public service provision, and by extension with crisis management. And just to remind you, indeed, the crisis that they had to experience were energy, the big movement of people, the forced displacement because of the Russian war against Ukraine, and other crises involved putting children to school, and so on and so forth. And so when we look at this polycentric governance system and how well they deal with crisis, we actually come to a theoretical puzzle. So basically, yes, we asked, how does this decentralized system sustain resilience in practice? Because that is actually not so clear cut. So there's extant literature that argues that having this many decision centers, having this decentralized state, can be actually bad for crisis management, because there can be there could be conflicts among different levels of government over the resources. There can be response that is slow and uncoordinated, and this so-called consolidationists that would argue we just need a more central government who's going to solve all the crises. But on the other side, there is the polycentricity literature and argument that says that actually heterogeneous responses, then they require this local knowledge, local co-production, and that is better when you have this actor at the local level who can quickly coordinate with local residents, and plus when citizens are closer to the authorities, they can assist the state. And when there is to offset the possible conflict, there's actually opportunity to practice so-called collaborative governance that can enable coordination. So with this theoretical puzzle in mind, we were very privileged to collaborate with the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities of the Council of Europe and the Association of Ukrainian Cities, which is the Ukrainian largest municipal government association. When we, in the July-September 2022, we were able to conduct a survey of these local authorities. We collected 241 responses, and we also did several interviews and focus groups. Here I have to say that although I will be showing data from this survey, my general understanding is also built upon 2 other studies which we did later. One of them is about how Ukrainian municipalities tackle internal displacement crisis. But in this one, I rely only on this survey, and we can see that the practices I will be talking about, they refer not to the biggest Ukrainian municipalities, actually 50,000 people or less. This is a smaller size of municipality. So building on what Andrei said, how we conceptualize resilience, we basically looked at resilience as resistance and adaptation. So we looked whether the municipalities have halted their operations or continued, and we see that we saw back then that about 30% never halted their operations, and many were able to come back quite quickly, already after 2 weeks, and 72% even provided administrative services, mostly of them in full. So in that point, we could say that the resilience was pretty high according to our conceptualization. And of course, whether the quality of services they provide that varies, but we still can see that municipalities are pretty functional. Now, which mechanisms, which we argue is linked to the polycentricity, actually they came out useful in a crisis. So one is co-production, and especially the municipalities were able to facilitate local knowledge, its circulation, and mobilize local resources, but also enable the experimentation and innovation. And also coordination with other systems is very important. So I have to say that these are what we got from literature, but we find that these mechanisms are relevant to Ukrainian municipalities, even though they may not be present in all municipalities in all their diversity. What we talk about here is what works when municipalities are resilient. So on this slide, you see the response to a question about, so we asked the municipalities first to indicate what is the biggest crisis that they had to deal with in the previous months of the full-scale Russian invasion. And these were, a lot of it was about internal displacement. And then we asked indicate which stakeholders and how were involved in solving the problem. Of course, we first asked whether anyone was involved, and those who said that they did, we asked this question. And so we find that municipalities engaged in co-production first in these 3 levels of citizen participation. They basically they facilitated that there was a knowledge exchange. For example, they made sure that they provided information to different stakeholder groups, and then they also made sure that there was some kind of getting their proposals, getting ideas from these groups, including the internally displaced people themselves, and also the entrepreneurs, which is this a bit darker green. And we also find that the feedback of different stakeholder groups was important. We found actually that the municipalities felt like they had to be very proactive in getting to the people, and the numbers that you have here above are the pillars like +25, for example, and others here. These are changes to the same question which we asked in a similar survey in 2021, so when there was no full-scale invasion. And what we found is that entrepreneurs, they became much more important for crisis management than they were under normal circumstances. That experts, actually, less municipalities involve experts. We probably think it's connected to how much that costs. And also it's connected to the necessity to quickly solve the problem here and now. And the entrepreneurs, they are there already. And here I want to give a few examples. The knowledge that was actually exchanged, it is what literature would call the tacit knowledge. So it's very contextual, it's practical knowledge, and it's usually knowledge about what kind of resources could be gotten where. And for example, municipalities quite often coordinated volunteers with the people who needed help, or they facilitated that the help would be sent to the front lines, to the units consisting of the people coming from that municipality. But also we found that almost all our respondents, 81%, they established communication channels in order to handle the crisis. They even established new communication channels, so they increased the information exchange in their municipalities. Next, what they also understood that the people themselves, they are a source of expertise in the crisis. And here we have a quote from the focus group from the Zhytomyr city, where they argued that they took once the internally displaced people landed in Zhytomyr, they organized themselves, and the local authority used their expertise, for example, to get a chatbot, according to which helped the local authority to learn what kind of skills were present among the internally displaced people, and even some of them were actually hired, and they tried to facilitate business development. Now I also want to highlight even more what we saw, and that was very interesting finding, that partnership is considered the deepest level of public engagement, because that is about sharing resources and sharing responsibility about the execution, or at least coordination of some activity. And so here we find that residents and entrepreneurs, it's the violet bar here, and the residents are green, that grew in much more municipalities told us that they involve these groups into the real problem solving, basically. And of course, we see here again that they would know very well who are entrepreneurs in their city. They could come and ask for help. And one here is, it's just a picture which I took in the city of Novovolinsk. That was a bit later than this study, in September 2000. I'm sorry, it was September 2022, not 23. And that was it's a city council location, and this used to be a room where the volunteers and the municipality coordinated in order to solve many problems that they had. And the map that you can see, it's from the region where they tried to allocate resources and people. And also we found when we talk about that polycentricity assumes this multiple decision-making centers, that also means that it works when they coordinate. And what we see here is, on this slide, is we asked what was helpful for you to solve the crisis. And for example, membership in local authorities associations was helped significantly for 71% of our respondents. They also established links with other municipalities in Ukraine, and international partnerships were very important. It was these things were about sharing knowledge, how to solve problems. For example, there was a case when transport officers of municipalities, they have a chat where they ask each other what is their policies when there is an air raid alert. But however, going a bit further with Maryna's contribution, but also here we see that at that point of time, there were not many who had this international partnership. So that is a point that needs to be worked on. And also, as I mentioned before, what polycentricity allows you all the participants in it, allows to experiment and innovate. Because when you don't have a central decision-making centers, everybody tries something of their own. And we notice structural adaptation when something that was developed for another purpose, like this platform Vice in a small town of Novoyarochiv, it was repurposed to coordinate action in case there would be a cut on mobile networks. But also we found a lot of digital adaptation. For example, smart village application in one town was used to evacuate people from their occupation. Interactive maps are used to show bomb shelters. And finally, for the polycentric system to work on the local level, it is also important that it has feedback loops to other systems. And of course, in the state, that the other system is the government. So, or very important system, let's say. And what we see here in the responses of our municipal respondents is local authorities and the central authorities perceived to be coordinating on strategic decisions. So you see this kind of greenish responses, but local authorities are not, they don't seem to be confident that whatever they say is influencing the decisions of central authorities. And unfortunately, there were some debates when this there could have been more coordination before the decision would be made. And that also there is a bit of uncertainty regarding the feedback. And I think what we see here is that there is an intrinsic thinking in the government and a lot of crisis situations. Let me remind the COVID situation when there was a push to centralize, close down, make the decisions in an attempt to make decisions more streamlined, to have less consultations and so on. So it's sort of natural in a crisis when there is some centralization, but our argument here is that Ukrainian resilience actually works because it is polycentric. So there has to be a bit more coordination here. And to sum up, decentralization reform by creating this polycentric structure, it actually contributed to favorable conditions for Ukrainian resilience. And we think it's, Oksana and I, we actually think that because Ukrainian society is organized in such a way that it is polycentric by itself, it doesn't really take on the hierarchy that much. The decentralization reform is a good structure for harnessing that potential for self-organization in the society. But also, I think what we see here is that collaborative crisis response is supporting the legitimacy of that crisis response because people are involved. And also, what we see here is challenges this conventional thinking about security through centralization and so-called regressive securitization. And actually, we could speak that more progressive securitization that is about joining forces, core production, that is something that may work for societal resilience also under security crisis. So thanks a lot, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Sandra. And Maryna, can I ask you a question? We have 15 minutes until the end of presentation. I don't know if you want to go into Q&A, so we take questions from the audience. Just let me know what you prefer.
Yeah, it appeared to be very convenient to have two speakers before me, so now I don't have time for any presentation. But what I would prefer, I use maybe 2 minutes to summarize what I actually wanted to say, and then we can jump into the Q&A. So in the project that we were referring to initially, Oleksandra's research is kind of satellite-ed, but it's entirely separate. But what we did also with Andrei and some colleagues is to look at the relationship between decentralization and martial law in Ukraine. Because a lot of people argue much about resilience and the fact that it's a decentralized system that actually helps Ukraine to sustain the invasion, and you heard this in Andrei's and Oleksandra's presentation. But what we also tried to do is to see whether the centralization and the martial law and the fact that the martial law provides under various circumstances for the establishment of local military administrations may somehow influence the achievements of decentralization reform. Just say, so we for this research we used legal analysis, but also interviews in municipalities, including even an insider interview with occupied municipalities. And what we find is that still the martial law let's say, creates an entirely different legal regime from the legal regime when decentralization achievements were functioning under peaceful conditions. However, we see that even though administrations got quite many new authorities, still gramadas are important actors, and administrations consult with them and involve them into different processes related, for example, to the redistribution of resources in the light of rebuilding. However, we see that since martial law has been in place for already almost 2 years, and nobody knows how long it will be in place as the war continues, there are still quite some risks for local communities, especially in the regions that most suffers from the war, to be replaced by administrations, and let us say the creation of some kind of a power vertical that will be less, let's say, connected to self-governance. Also, there are some risks that are concerned with the centralization of recovery funds, also because not all gramadas, even though they are very active and lively, have the same level of capacity. And in these connections, some smaller gramadas, especially rural ones, close to the front line, may experience quite considerable challenges when getting resources necessary for rebuilding, by contrast with big urban gramadas that find it quite easy to have independent relations with international donors, have different delegations visiting them, engage into international projects, and so on and so forth. So capacity is still an important concern, and definitely we shouldn't let's say, underestimate the role of martial law and the special legal regime that we have under the war. So this was a bit of a pinch of salt into this beautiful picture of the resilience of Ukrainian municipalities. And now we have 12 minutes for questions.
Thank you so much, Maryna. Again, apologies, our event runs only for an hour, and it seems like we can have a whole conference on this question. And I'll be reaching out to you if there are any resources you want to share or something you have not discussed during the talk. Please share it, and we'll share it with our audience. And now it's time for questions. And I have a question from Doug Jordan. And Doug, do you want to talk yourself, or do you want me to read it? It's up to you. I'm happy to turn the mic to you.
You can read it.
Awesome. So Doug is asking that many other nations are looking at the resilience in Ukraine, and you mentioned that in your presentations as well. Is there any potential way to synthesize this research in some lessons learned or best practices? And is there potential for this to be a follow-up on project? Whoever wants to take that one.
Thank you, Iuliia, and thank you. Yeah, I just missed the name, Doug, for the question. Yeah, it's correct, Doug Jordan, for the question. So in our article, we did some recommendations and made some key emphasis on things which are important for resilience. So these are things, for example, when dealing with own income of municipalities and agreements with others, physical hubs, and so on. So these are quite practical things that can be implemented in different municipalities elsewhere. Also, I think Oleksandra and Oksana, when they were publishing their research, they also have a policy brief in Ponar's Eurasia, where one can read in quite a practical way how this polycentric governance is exercised and synthesize some lessons. So as for a continuation, not sure, we will definitely continue with this topic as we have the whole center for it, but now also the center focuses quite much on capacity building and kind of more practical projects for municipalities rather this kind of academic research. So maybe Oleksandra wants to add something.
Yeah, I just want to say that please stay tuned, because today we actually sent out the survey, the repetition of the survey to our partners in the association. So we will definitely have a follow-up publication.
Thank you so much for that answer. And are there any other questions from the audience? I do have questions, but I want to make sure everyone in the audience asks theirs. I think I'll fire away, have enough time for that. So I really appreciated in your research and how you took the regional differences. Yes, and you talked extensively about during your presentation. I'm curious, have you encountered any disparities when it comes to proximity to the front line or to territories that have been under occupation versus those that did not undergo occupation, for example, and any insights into like this broader strategies, like how we can apply them to other zones of conflict?
I don't know if Andrei wants to take this question with regard to the first article.
Yes, I can start about our article that present first with Maryna. We use different predictors about the different type of regions, not only oblast difference over the whole Ukrainian macroeconomic regions, but we use some predictors named like the distance to the border to Russia and Belarus, and we should understand that nowadays not only the whole border with Ukraine with Russia and Belarus, it's a front line for us, and these predictors we see that we have some problems in these hromadas that have in this 30 kilometers zone to this front line, and it was kind of one of the predictors that we also mentioned in our article. You can find it about it. And also, we use some limitations to understand that in our research, if it was in Hromada, some occupied Hromadas, we don't see the robustness check and some robustness measurements, because we understand that if you are under occupation, you can be robust and function your administrative functions as well. So it's maybe Oleksandra and Maryna add something about some lesson learned about this, but it's all you can find the main thing in our research and article. And also I want to mention that to the previous question, we also have some policy paper based on our first article, also on Ponars, and we will send you and you can share it with audience.
Thanks, Andrea. That's the article in Ponars. I really encourage everyone to read a first take. That's how I found your research. Yes. So, and I think Oleksandra shared that. And again, we'll be sending these links to everyone. Maryna, I think you wanted to follow up on that.
Yeah, I just want to say that we also consider this factor of the proximity to the front line in this last article when we deal with martial law and its influence on decentralization. And what we found is that the communities that were under occupation or are close to the front line, they experience much more challenges with local self-governance, typically with basically preserving the local self-governance bodies functioning, and therefore they're more prone to this challenge of having local military administrations and let's say losing this facet of local self-governance or not having it functioning properly after, for example, being deoccupied, because it's not possible to conduct elections there, and therefore the president has the power to create local military administrations there. So definitely there is a huge difference, for example, between some municipality in the Lviv region that is far from the front line and almost never experience shelling and such kind of issues, and the municipality somewhere in Zaporizhia or Donetsk region.
Yeah, I wanted to add a few comments here. Speaking of the challenges for the collaborative governance to work, the one I showed now, what is important is to have some degree of social cohesion and trust. So whenever there are any maybe conflicts, not conflicts in a sense that, you know, somebody doesn't, some people may not like her, some money spent or whatever. So in that case, or let's say people have different experiences of war, and this experience sometimes clash, because sometimes some people have their very dearest, closest people in the very, very dangerous situation. Some people don't have that. So it may take, this is the social, these factors, they can affect social cohesion. And that's why when one of the lessons learned for us is that there has to be active promotion of social cohesion through dialogical, deliberative means, and the civil society in Ukraine is already doing such programs and projects, and it's very important to support their effort and always to make sure that local authorities are involved as part of this dialogical exchange. And I also saw that there was a question. I did not see in that particular case any traces of involvement of the military of the higher rank, but what we see is that for other types of problem solving, for example, there may be a council set up where there would be mayors and the regional military administration sitting together. And in Rivne, they had it for placement of internally displaced people so that they could allocate them to places where there was housing for them. We also see that a lot of coordination takes place informally, which is perhaps even good for security reasons. And but also I know that our university specifically was also doing some work to facilitate this. So facilitators, communicators actually come up as very important learning from Ukrainian experience, that these are actors that are very important.
Thank you for that. We have a BS in communications here at the college, so that's always great to hear. And we have 2 minutes, and I just want to give Dean Siedschlag to maybe wrap up the conversation, and then maybe 30 seconds each of the panelists if you have last minute comments. And thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you so much, Iuliia, and the whole panel. That was incredibly insightful and really took our series to the next level also. So thank you for doing that. And then also thank you for sharing your publications. You certainly have a captive audience, not only for your presentation, but also for your publication. We're looking forward to follow up reading those. And like I said, if you're interested in learning more about what we at the College of Arts and Sciences here at Embry-Riddle Worldwide do, I posted the link to our departmental homepage for security and emergency services, and the chat also can learn about the online Master of Science in Human Security and Resilience program that Iuliia leads, that is immediately related to the topic. And then also, if you go back to the main landing page, the Bachelor of Science also online in communication that Alex Reister is here also on the call leads, and that is currently, as we speak, introducing a specialization in risk crisis and resilience communication. So I am certain that for Alex and his and her evolving program, that your presentation and your publications are also of utmost relevance. So with that, back to you, Iuliia, and like you said, for the final comments from our panel here. Thank you, and be safe.
Thank you, Dean Siedschlag, and let's start with Maryna, as she's closer to me on the screen in Zoom.
Yeah, thank you very much, Iuliia, also, and thank you, Mr. Siedschlag, for kind words. To tell the truth, I don't have a substantive comment, but probably being more general here and having the US audience, I would just say that we're waiting with great suspension, with great suspense towards the elections and towards all the discussion in Congress which relates to US aid to Ukraine. And it would be really very good that in case such discussions could have also encompassed more geopolitical and broader international security issues, so that there is more feeling in the US that aiding Ukraine in the battlefield is an investment into global security and not just the charity event or something like this, or the polygon for learning something what relates to resilience and going through war. We really need assistance, and it would be very much appreciated if you could, in your networks, in meeting policymakers, also speak about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Maryna, and thank you for connecting it to the present. And again, as Dean Siedschlag mentioned, thank you all for joining in the active war zone for this presentation. Andrei and Oleksandra, last minute comments from you.
Just fully side with Maryna, and thank you all for the support that you show to us and also from your country.
Yes, and also from me, thank for possibility to present our research, and for all people who are interested maybe in further studies in Kyiv School of Economics, especially in our center. We have a lot of data based on the Ukrainian resilience and also about Ukrainian administrative divide, and started from the economics to some social data. So if you're interested in further research or maybe some work, you can write to the mail that also maybe will be attached there. So thank you for all.
Thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of your week. And again, we'll be sharing all the resources and, as Andrei mentioned, contact information. So for those interested in collaborating, please reach out. And as Siedschlag mentioned, we do a lot of this work, so there is a lot of opportunities for that. And thanks again for everyone to joining, and we hope to see you in the next presentation on Resilience Reimagined. Thank you.